Hello, my name is Jeff Rolka. I want to thank you for checking out my video. This is this week's live event, and I want to welcome you to what is going on here. The chat is open. I think we're working. Let me make sure. Should be going. Hello, my name is Jeff Rolka. Now I'm going to pause that, because I cannot concentrate with my own voice talking back at me a few moments after I have said whatever it was I was saying. So welcome. This is your live event. Eventually I'll find the appropriate window where I can find my chat. There we go. Hello, Chalamet Mochoir. Welcome. Hello, Huvian. Hello, Mrs. Webster. Good day to you as well. Thank you. I appreciate it. I always find it quite titillating when someone calls me maestro. Fly Crazy SXY Cool, hello there. This is your live event, and I'm here to just chit-chat with you about voice-related or music-related things. Anything else you might want to bring up is pretty fair game. Huvian F asks how I am. I'm doing quite well, thank you. A little jet-lagged. I am back in California, and my body still thinks I'm in England. So right now, it feels like 6 p.m., but I woke up at midnight in my time zone now, 10 hours ago, and have just been feeling funny, but good otherwise. So Andrew Curry, hello. Justin Lack, hello. Patty GQ, hello to you. Fly Crazy SX Cool, how do I get around that pinched sound in my voice? Interesting question. Good day, Jeff. Good day, JC's Radiant Ray. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Altug, Happy New Year to you as well, and hello, good to see you. Do I prefer East Indian classical, Chalamet Mochoir? Over what? Would be my question in response to that. If you're referring to those scales that I recently posted, I had a standing request for non-Western tonal music, tradition scale work and exercise work. And I had done some stuff like that some time ago, and I just thought, I would just sort of start there. I was sifting through a variety of different scales and ragas and thinking about what I would sort of embark upon, and I just picked those two because I really liked the way that they sounded. I thought they were really refreshing and interesting, and especially I believe the Hunt Sejuani scale was the one that is, it's effectively a pentatonic scale. It's only got 5 notes. But instead of using the 6th scale degree, which would be a typical pentatonic, it uses the 7th. And it was just like someone had pulled the cotton out of my ears. It was so, it's such a simple thing. It's simply swapping one note for another, but it changes so much about the scale and the way it sounds, and I think the melodic and harmonic implications it's just really cool. So I don't necessarily have any preference for that over any other scale system or anything like that. I mostly teach and sing, and the music that I write is in Western tonal music. I don't think about that as my preference necessarily. It's just what most of my training, nearly all of my training and understanding and studies have been in that discipline. But I'm always open to learning new scales and new patterns and experiencing those things. Now, before I dive into everyone's questions, I had a question which I thought was a rather timely thing. Mrs. Webster, whom I think is already here. Yes, Mrs. Webster emailed about why is it so difficult to sing lower in volume? And that is perhaps one of the trickier things that we are tasked with doing from time to time. But I think if we look at it in stages and with certain conditions, we can begin to dissect it a little bit and maybe come to an understanding about it. So one of the difficulties with singing quietly is that our almost innate habitual response is to reduce the flow of air. And we do this by decreasing subglottic engagement, reducing the engagement in our abdominal musculature and the inner and outer obliques, the intercostal muscles, the rectus abdominis muscles. And that reduces the subglottic air pressure below the epiglottis. And you usually get into trouble there because what happens is that the musculature on the larynx will begin to get tenser and tenser and tenser in order to try to maintain pitch. This is particularly true if we are at the top of our thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, chest voice, maybe getting into the zona di passaggio, or for sure above the secondo passaggio. And so the trick is to not reduce that engagement. In fact, if we increase the subglottic air pressure, it will allow the flow of air to reduce over the vocal fold, and we'll get a softer dynamic without squeezing out the notes, without getting the muscles around the larynx to tense up so much. However, there's a sort of bottom line dynamic level that we have to create at any given range to have consistent tone. So if you want to sing an octave scale, and have the tone match across that entire range, then there's a baseline dynamic level you're going to end up creating. Now, if I get much softer than that, then I'm going to engage more, I'm going to reduce the flow of air. However, you'll start to hear more of how I'm going through the zona di passaggio to the secondo passaggio. You're going to hear more of the affectations that come with maintaining good tone quality in that range, but I'm going below the minimum airflow requirement to maintain consistent tone. And if I go further still, you start to hear more of that cricothyroid dominant singing voice or head voice affectation coming in through the zona di passaggio, because I've reduced the flow of air in an effort to be softer so much that I'm just not getting enough vibration from the vocal fold to adequately get all of the soft tissues resonating sympathetically along with my voice in that range. So singing soft is challenging. Oftentimes, I think we have to consider why we're singing soft in order to fully understand how we're going to achieve it. So if we truly must be soft because another singer in the ensemble is supposed to be the principal voice at that point, then it's quite possible that there's an acceptable amount of tonal shadings or colorings that we can utilize in order to stay out of their way. Now, if we're still the solo voice, but we want to be softer for some emotive quality or in order to convey something, then it's possible that it may be appropriate to reduce our volume as much as we can, but also be a bit more legato, be a bit softer in how we're articulating the consonants of the line. And so in a way, we are being soft in intent without necessarily being truly at a piano or pianissimo dynamic level, being truly, objectively soft. And that is also kind of like a way of rounding out and finishing this point, which is that dynamics are relative. The dynamic range, in other words, the difference in dynamic contrast that an oboe can create is much different than that of a saxophone or a trumpet or a piano. A teacher of mine at university used to say that they could save a lot of money on ink if they only printed 2 dynamics for oboes, because the oboe has such a constrained mode of producing tone that really the differences in volume are rather, it doesn't have a wide dynamic range. Not nearly so much so as like a saxophone. And trumpets too have very, very wide dynamic ranges. They can create really different grades of dynamics in there. The human voice, I think, falls somewhere in the middle of all this. And depending on what genre you're singing as well, there are acceptable tonal qualities that you can utilize to expand your dynamic range or will constrict it. So by way of example, an opera singer who's singing without amplification with an orchestral ensemble of some degree. Now, those arrangements will be tailored to the piece. So in other words, if the opera singer is singing a very soft passage and they are meant to be heard above the orchestra, the arrangement, the number of instruments, and the instructions for the instrumentalists will reflect that in the piece. But that being said, there's still a base level dynamic range they need to create, even with the advantages of modern acoustic symphonic halls, to be heard. In other words, even if it says piano, they're still going to sing at a volume that maintains consistent tone and allows them to be heard over the accompanying instruments in the size hall that they are in. So Mrs. Webster, I hope that answers your question. I got a little long-winded there, but it was fun. Altug says, Happy New Year's. I've answered those just in lack. You're honestly the best. You helped me so much. Thank you very much. I'm glad to help, and I'm glad that you're here. Mrs. Webster, your body lies over the... Yes, it does. That is an awesome adaptation that I can honestly have never seen before, and is lovely. It's very cool. Bob Omar, hello. King, please blues us with a whistle register video. Oh, I was waiting. Thank you a lot. You're best. I've talked about this before. Teaching whistle register is not my forte. And, you know, the thing about it is the more I read about it, the more there's sort of a mystery about how those tones are produced. I mean, I could certainly produce a practice video that would utilize notes in that range, but, you know, when it comes to singing over the registration events, over the secondo passaggio or the falsetto or flageolet registers of the voice, I feel very, very comfortable and confident about that. And I'll keep on reading a little bit more. Let me take another look. Let me read a little bit more about what Richard Miller writes about this and how to access it and all that, and let me see if I can come up with something for you. Thank you for your request, Bob. John, hello, Jeff. I wonder if you know how tonsils affect one's voice. I have large tonsils and I'm going to a surgery to remove them. Should I be concerned about anything? So first of all, John, your doctor or surgeon is the first person to ask about that. They will know much better than I about how it may or may not affect your singing voice. That being said, a friend of mine and a client I believe he had a dual surgery, which was tonsillectomy as well as something with his adenoids, because I believe he had a bit of sleep apnea. So there's something to do with the adenoids, I think, in that surgery. And he was informed that it may have a slight impact, a slight deepening of his voice may occur. Honestly, I haven't heard him sing post-op, so I don't know. And this happened some time ago that he had this done. So I don't know what, if any, effect there has been. However, the word on the street with this particular singer-songwriter is that he and I may begin working on a new record. This is not my record. This is me working with him in an engineering and production capacity. And I may get a much closer look at what happens, post surgery. So, if you care to ask again at a later date, if I've begun that project, I might have a bit more information for you. I've co-produced or worked on records. I think we've done 2 or 3 records together. Poets on the Wall. Poets on the Wall, Late Night Conversations. I feel like there's another record in there too. So I feel I know this particular individual's voice quite well. I'll definitely notice if there's a difference, and certainly I'll notice in the range of the keys that we utilize. Altug. Oh, sorry here. John's got a few follow-ups. I will get to that, Altug. In addition, my tonsils are swollen most of the time after singing especially, and I think my voice isn't bright enough despite all the exercises. Then that, well, the brightness would be more about how much the pharynx is engaged, how much that's being allowed to vibrate and activate the singer's formant. But if your tonsils are that swollen, I could envision a situation where you're not really allowing the soft tissues to vibrate, especially if it's hurting you, which is awful. I hope, please accept my wishes that everything goes smoothly and without issue for you, and I hope that you come back from that with some of these issues resolved. Yeah, I feel like a lot of these questions, I mean, certainly the brightness, if it's physically hurting you or they're swollen, I could see why you might be holding back and not getting as much sympathetic vibrations and resonance in your voice. Yeah, and that would definitely cue into the brightness, especially too if there's any kind of sinus issues that are occurring with this, that would have an impact on the brilliance of your voice as well. Altug, Jeff, would you also do a jazz warm-up like Ionian to the 9th and Dorian? I'm guessing Physician is more Phrygian, so on. Absolutely, Altug. There is a Phrygian warm-up out there. I think I did Dorian and Mixolydian as well. Ionian, of course, is the home key or the like the major scale. And the extended range warm-ups have Ionian scales or major scales that do go to the 9th. So those already exist. I think the long scale warm-up utilizes that pattern. But I can certainly do, honestly, I should just be doing more of those kind of scales in general. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Yeah, Phrygian, gotcha. Andrew, am I a tenor? Yes. Altug, then for the adventurous, maybe modes of melodic minor. Interesting. Altug, thank you, Altug. Jan, Happy New Year, Jeff. Happy New Year to all the rest of you as well, from Jan Lyon. Question, do you use compressor while recording? What are the pros and cons? Very interesting question. I love production questions. It's always like a nice, sort of change of pace. Use of compression in recording varies quite a lot. If speaking for myself personally, when I personally am recording, typically no. But sometimes I'll use just a little hint of it. It kind of depends a little bit on which preamp I'm using. If I'm using the Neve, I have a Neve Portico 5012 dual preamp. If I'm using that, which is usually my go-to preamp for my voice, I don't use any compression. I just go straight through that into the DAW, into the interface. If I'm using the 737, then that has an optical compressor on it, and I'll typically put like a really, really light amount of compression on there. The pros and cons, generically, the con is that if you print it, if you use it going in, you can't undo it. It's like using equalization. It's like using a a hardware EQ going into your digital audio workstation. Once it's on there, it's printed, you cannot undo it. Or if you've scooped something out, you can't really replace it. You can't fill it in. There's only so much you can do with that. So I tend to record pretty flat in terms of EQ and compression. You know, again, cons, like let's just say that you set your EQ, your compression settings with too hard an attack, too hard a knee, as they say, and it starts pumping. If you hear that, most of us would say that that is a bad thing, that we don't want to hear compression pumping on the vocal, and then you're gonna have to redo that. You can't really fix that in post. The pros, on the other hand, if you've got the compression set appropriately and you have a take where maybe you are singing too loud at a certain point and you didn't work the mic appropriately, you may in fact have saved the take because the compressor will hold down the overall volume going into the DAW, and so it might avoid it from digitally clipping. And that might save the take for you. You know, just off the top of my head, we could go on and on and on, getting into specific scenarios and specific uses of compressors. And we haven't even begun to talk about like the differences in a given vocalist. Because I mean, ultimately, I think if you're going to use a compressor in line going into the DAW, and I'm talking specifically about a hardware compressor. If you're using a software compressor, it doesn't really matter because most of that isn't printed. Most of that isn't recorded to the track. But if you've got an analog compressor in your signal chain, that'll be printed to the track. So, you know, we haven't even gotten into the specifics around the vocalist you may be working with, but that I think really is the nut of the question. And that should be what drives your decision whether to use it or to not. If you've got a vocalist who's repeatedly clipping the mic, despite maybe you're asking them to try to work the mic or back off or adjusting the gain, then that can be problematic. Particularly if you're trying to cut everything in one contiguous take where you have wide dynamic ranges between like a verse and a chorus, then the compressor might help you or your vocalist manage their volume a little bit in the chorus and allow you to still have a very like up close and personal amount of presence on the verses where they may be a little bit lower in volume and you've got the gain a little bit higher on the preamp. That'll give you a more near field, close feel to your vocalist, and use of the compressor in the choruses will mean that they might not have to work the mic quite so aggressively, and you don't have to change your gain and do that kind of adjustment on the fly. Altug, at B4 and up, all my consonants sound the same. Is that the way it's supposed to be? I would say that that's not surprising. Certainly, keeping the flow of air moving when you're up above that registration, if you're moving above that registration event, you really want to keep the air moving. And so sort of softening the, I need to speed up here. Where do we go? Sorry about that. Okay. Softening the consonants in order to maintain flow of air is really, really important. Ultimately, we want our engagement and the maintenance of the subglottic air pressure to be such that we have a little bit more flexibility and we can perhaps articulate with a little bit more enunciation. But I think that having that that sort of downplayed importance of consonants in that range of the voice is a necessary step along the way. I think that you will find that as you continue to sing and practice up there, you will gain more flexibility with that. But that, to me, what you're reporting to me, it sounds normal and a necessary step along the way. Happy typo. Mrs. Webster at John Burnham. Karuka, hello, and hello to you, at Mrs. Webster from John Burnham. Karuka, where should the sound be directed when singing in chest voice? That's an interesting question. One might argue that it doesn't really matter. That if we're talking about anything other than adduction of the vocal fold and adequate subglottic pressure, we're simply talking about directions in order to elicit some other mode of adduction. In other words, if you have a vocalist who sounds dull, you know, like they sing, we might say, oh, bring it more forward into the mask. And the sound of their voice becomes more brilliant. And we say, ah, you know, you've gotten more resonance in your mask range, or in the mask of your face, and that's bringing forth this resonance. Well, a minor amount of that might be true, but what's more likely is that what we've gotten them to do is to shift their focus a little bit, and they've lessened the muscular engagement around the larynx, and they're allowing for more efficient adduction of the vocal fold, and that's loosening the musculature in the oral cavity and giving us more of that overall resonance of their voice. So it's not that it's necessarily the concept of directing the sound of one's voice isn't what's actually, it's not that it's actually going into the mask or into the sinus cavity. It's that thinking about that has changed the way that the singer is adducting the vocal fold and using their subglottic air pressure. I've been reading about this quite a bit in Richard Miller's works because that's kind of what I do, and I always want to understand more about how our voices operate. I want to convey information in the most efficient way that I possibly can, and so much of what we sense, the feelings, the sensations that we experience are subjective. One person's dullness may be another person's brilliance and sharpness. And so when we talk about like directing airflow, it's largely subjective. If I say, well, you know, it's your chest voice, it should be directed straight out of your mouth. Well, what feels to be straight out of my mouth might not feel the same to you. And so my direction for you is what are the sound qualities, what are the tonal qualities in your voice that are, shall I say, inspiring you to ask that question. And in listening to the sound of your voice, you know, listen to the quality of the vowels. Listen to whether or not the vowels are matching up. If they are, but there's an overall quality to your voice that isn't satisfactory, try to listen to that, and then, honestly, even if you're listening to it, the balance is where you will find the neutral singing position, where you'll get access to the most brilliance and most flexibility around your voice. So my direction to you isn't so much to think about how to direct your voice, but to think about how you are engaging it and how you are adducting the vocal fold. Can you sing short notes, he, with an H sound before them, and get the vocal fold to adduct so you get the same kind of sound as if you were to sing we, he. Oftentimes what you'll get is we, he, which lets you know that you're not actually adducting the vocal fold as efficiently as you could, and getting that adduction will probably resolve any kind of tonal inconsistencies that may be occurring, that may be the impetus for that question. I know I got really circuitous on that, but the thing is, without hearing you, it's really hard to say, and I don't want to give an arbitrary answer about directing your voice without knowing what's going on with your voice. Because, you know, I might still use those directions of think up or think out or something like that in an effort to move a vocalist along in a lesson. But there isn't necessarily any one arbitrary, this is where it's directed. Mohammed, hello Jeff. It's hard to guess without hearing, but I am 16 male with G sharp 4 as my highest on a good day. Should I follow your tenor or baritone videos? And is that note my peak, or can I reach higher? You're right. It is hard to know without hearing. If you're singing that in your thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, and it's balanced, then that's probably you're either belting or it's at your secondo passaggio. And you will certainly be able to sing higher than that, but that is dependent on making a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio. If you are belting that out, you need to find the secondo passaggio and begin to practice the transition over there. I'm not saying that you can't belt. I'm just saying that that's one way to do it. There are other ways to do it as well, too, that will enable you to go much, much higher than that. In the meantime, I would, again, it's really hard to say. It's more about where the secondo passaggio is. My inclination is to have you using the baritone videos and working towards alignment of your voice in your thyroarytenoid dominant singing voice, your chest voice. And then, and these are the baritone range, anything that doesn't say full range. As everything comes into alignment, then switch to full range and see how that feels. If you find that you're not getting to the secondo passaggio, then maybe switch over to tenor, but switch back to the non-full range videos, working up to the top of the zona di passaggio in there, working through your vowel modifications in the zona di passaggio, and then working on your registration event. And that would set you up quite well, I should think. Andrew, as a tenor, I sing a lot of high notes. I am curious, what do you think is the best approach to singing high notes? I am an advocate of serving the song, but and that means sometimes doing different things depending on the music that you happen to be singing, sometimes belting, sometimes making a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio. I primarily teach a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio because most people innately know what to do when they want to belt. Belting is, I mean, you know, if I'm gonna couch it in a pedagogical standpoint, I would say that you must increase breath energy and restrict the elongation of the vocal fold at and above the secondo passaggio. An increase in breath energy is required in order to vibrate the vocal fold sufficient to maintain pitch. If I want to be not pedagogical about it, then I'm going to say that you're going to yell louder and louder and louder, because that's not exactly what's happening when you belt effectively. But that's the simplest way to put it. It's also called entering the call of the voice. Most people can do that innately. It's rare to find, in my experience, it's rare to find someone that sings smoothly over the secondo passaggio. And that is what I spend most of my time in upper register work teaching people to do. But once you've done that, there's 9 times out of 10, once your technique is sufficient, the desire to belt stuff out recedes quite a lot because you have so much more flexibility, and issues of fatigue and wear and tear in your voice simply cease to exist for the most part when you're making a good transition over the secondo passaggio. And that's what I advocate, is singing it in what would be called voce piena in testa, which I think is commonly called reinforced head voice or reinforced falsetto, which I don't particularly like those phrases because I feel that they are deceiving. Voce piena in testa, the sound of chest voice in head voice. Mrs. Webster, you're welcome. You're very, very welcome. I hope that that helps out answering that question. JC Rating Ray, Jeff, I have discovered a sensitivity to sound which is disadvantageous. If instruments or my own voice feel too loud, I feel overpowered and shrink back my singing from what I practiced. Thoughts? I'm with you on this. And you know, the solutions to this are there's a couple solutions. One, earplugs is one solution, and I'm not necessarily suggesting you go to Walgreens or CVS and get the bright orange ones. I personally have a pair of, it's a really silly name. It's on the influencer page. I think it's on the, is it? It's not. I'll have to find them and put them on there. So I have a shop on Amazon.com. It's amazon.com/shop/Jeff Rolka, I think. And I put like gear and little things and stuff like that that I am an advocate of. It is a way to support this channel too, because when you click through there, a percentage of what you buy is donated to the channel. But I use Eargasm. It's really silly. Eargasm earplugs. I'm not sponsored by them, but they have a fairly flat. I believe they are etymiotic earplugs. So they actually have like a paper cone diaphragm in the attenuator that vibrates similarly to your eardrum, and it gives you a very flat response. In other words, it sounds pretty. I mean, it's as good as an earplug is going to get. And they're not as expensive as the ones where you get the mold. Now that's another level up that you can do. They will block out everything. They're a little bit expensive, and you have to go to a person who can pour the wax in your ear and make a mold, which is really uncomfortable, but tolerable. And those sound pretty good. Like those earplugs work really, really well. Next up is in-ear monitors, and that can get complicated really quickly, because now you're asking a sound engineer to do your in-ear mix, and if it's too loud or too soft, there's only so much you can do on your receiver pack. Though you can usually set a brick wall limiter, which will keep your ears from being damaged. But a bad in-ear monitor can be worse than wedge monitors with earplugs. So it's tough, but my first recommendation is get a decent set of earplugs, so that you can at least save your hearing, you know, that you can protect your ears, which is the most important thing. And like any of this stuff, consistency and practice and time is what's going to help with it. So it's going to be kind of awful when you, I mean, at least for me, it was really awful when I first started wearing earplugs on stage. But over time, and consistently using them, it got a little bit better. But again, you're still subject to your sound engineer's mix. And if they give you a terrible mix, you know, ask for stuff and try and get them to get the mix better, but you're still at their mercy. Altug, is dynamic range related to FOC? Interesting question. That's a very interesting question, Altug. I'm actually going to say that I want to do some reading on that, and I will have to come back with an answer for that. My suspicion is that there is a certain degree of that there may be certain limiting factors with FOC, but I would think of it related more to the overall tessitura of the note that's being created. High frequencies tend to travel more quickly, and so they tend to get ahead of things and be perceived of as being louder. Lower notes, the opposite is true. Mrs. Webster, I usually sing softer to allow blend to occur. Fair enough. I'm singing in an a cappella group, and many of the members are just getting started on their musical journey. My trumpet voice in a group of flutes. Yes, and singing in ensembles is very different. And in one respect, what we're working on in the channel, the exercises and the modes of singing that I'm asking you to utilize is about getting to a neutral tone production, what one might call a natural singing voice. Thing about that, though, is that choir, the emphasis in choir is to blend. So you might not necessarily be able to use your neutral singing position in a choir if everyone else is blended in a different way. So on the plus side, the flexibility that you'll have working with what I use on the channel should be such that it's not a problem to adapt to the choir. But yeah, if you're singing in your neutral position and they're all blended, you're probably going to jump out. Michael, hi Jeff. Why can I sing lower than my comfortable range, notes more easily on inhale than exhale? Eventually I've got to use vocal fry, but it does not sound natural anymore. Is it possible to fix? That's a very interesting question. My initial thought is that that if you're inhaling, you're almost certainly abducting the vocal folds, so it's separating slightly. And it's going to be primarily comprised of vocal fry, even if it sounds steady before you use it. But if it's not the natural tone, and why I'm a little bit confused. What is it you're looking to fix here? Are you looking to fix singing lower notes while exhaling and singing exhaling, and having the tone match more? I'm not exactly sure what the question is in that. What are we trying to fix here? If you're trying to fix it on the inhale, I'm not sure that I have a whole lot of advice for you. In particular, like my suspicion here is that sound is primarily created by an abducted vocal fold, which would be which would be in some part comprised of vocal fry, even if it's a steady sounding sound. Interesting question though. Maybe chime in with a little bit more, and if we have time, perhaps I can help. Yop from Holland, thank you. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. I know I've been kind of dawdling today. It's quite likely, I'm going to mention this now, if I don't get to your question, please write it into the comments of this video so that I can answer it. I am a little bit horribly jet lagged today, and so I know that I'm going a little bit slower than normal, but I will answer your questions. Just drop it into the comments, and thank you for being here. Bach, look, I have no questions, just saying thanks for your videos. Thank you, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. Sean F, so I have a question for you. I'm tenor and I want to so good that some famous Celtic singers would say, yes, I want to sing with, I love Celtic music. So my question is, will I get good watching you? Maybe. If you use the videos and you pay very close objective attention to your voice, then it is entirely possible, using the videos on the channel, to get your vowels into alignment, get your airflow working so that you're getting good tone quality and consistent tone quality, and ultimately use the videos to learn to make a smooth transition over the secondo passaggio and sing seamlessly across your secondo passaggio break. But that requires your participation, and it also requires discipline in your practice. Furthermore, I would say that it would be important and helpful to set up some means by which you can objectively observe your singing without doing it in real time. So, you know, every fortnight record yourself, or once a month record yourself singing scales, you know, and objectively listen to it and identify carefully the areas that are out of alignment or don't sound right. Also, it's hard to know what level of acuity your overall musicianship is at. So, can you hear things that are not in tune? How acutely do you hear intonation? How acutely do you hear the tonal characteristics of your voice? You will certainly learn those things in time, but it will require observation, and so that's part of it. But the tools are all there. I have, as people have asked questions or had requests about videos or content, I've put it up there. But everything on the channel are all aspects of my teaching and the same exercises and scales that I use for all of my clients. But the difference is that I can listen to my clients, hear what their strong suits are, hear what needs an improvement, and then tailor the exercises. And that's what you will have to do. And if you don't know what to listen for, then you have to learn to do that too. And that can be challenging, but it's all there. All the information is on the channel. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that very much. Janet 2A has retracted her question. Mrs. Jan Martin Perez, what is the most important thing to work on to become an opera singer like Andrea Bocelli? I don't know that I could really whittle that down to one. If I named one simple thing, I think that it would be so vague as to be almost meaningless, but my answer would be musicianship. Musicianship is an understanding of the music beyond the instrument. The instrument in this case is the human voice. And so, if we do not understand music theory, if we don't understand how to count rhythm, how to read rhythm, or how to read music, those are all limiting factors. In terms of mastering our own instrument, that is part of what we work towards. So at some point, I would say that we can all arrive at a degree of mastery. That doesn't mean we have no further to go. It just means that maybe to a non-vocalist, they cannot necessarily tell when we're having a good day or a bad day. They cease to hear the transition points in our voices. They cease to hear anything that we might perceive of as a flaw. To them, it just sounds like someone who's singing quite well. That's a sort of baseline level of mastery, I would say. But that's just the beginning. So yeah, if I had to reduce it down to one thing, overall musicianship and competency. At Altec, hi Jeff, Market Forces. So far, what I've been doing is going through your tenor playlist, which is full of great warm-ups. If I keep following the warm-ups and some of the exercises, is this enough? I kind of addressed that just a moment ago. That will certainly move you towards mastery of your instrument, but it will not fill in the blanks in terms of counting or overall musicianship. So an understanding of the music theory behind the compositional process, the theory of how the music is made, counting and rhythm and understanding of it, and how to analyze it so that you can execute it properly and how it integrates with the music that you're singing along with. I might also add interpretation and an understanding of phrasing, how melodies are put together, and how to determine when we might have a longer, more extended phrase versus a phrase that to the common listener would sound as if we have not breathed, but we're actually taking tiny little top-up breaths all throughout the phrase, so small that they're imperceivable, but keep that phrase going and going and going and going and going as if we've got this, a tube of air stuck in our back to keep us going. So yeah, no, certainly towards mastery of your instrument, but there's a lot more to being a good musician than just than just mastering the instrument. At John Burnham, what is the most... Oh, I already read that one. Smiley face from Mrs. Webster. Yeah, I stopped for 1 year singing because I was sick. Now I started singing for 6 months and I can't reach the high C or higher than that. What can I do? I sing gospel and pop songs. Keep going. Just give yourself some time to access that register. John Burnham, all right, Jeff, thanks a lot. Happy New Year. Thank you. You too. At Mrs. Webster. It was very eloquent. I agree with JC's Radiant Ray. Market Forces, also, how long should I practice before adding more chord? I think what you mean by that is having a fuller sound, as if to say that you're adding more of the vocal cord to your sound. And my suggestion would be to not limit, not think about it in terms of more or less, but think about your warm-ups in terms of achieving balance. So begin your warm-ups balanced, and I would tailor the range of your warm-ups to allow you to begin in a balanced format and then expand your range outwards from there as you increase your warm-up, so that you're always beginning your warm-up with a balanced mode of phonation. If I've interpreted your use of the word chord there correctly. Please correct me if I have not. At Altug, at Yop, at Mrs. Webster, at Janet 2A, at Yop. Mrs. Webster, I have to go, guys. Take care, Mrs. Webster. If you're still there, have a great week. I'll hopefully see you next week. Jason's Radiant Ray at Mrs. Webster. Logan Simmons, any tips having a richer sound in head voice? I'm a tenor, my high notes sound whistly, airy. Okay, so the airy thing there is a bit of a giveaway. If you've got an airy sound in your head voice, then you're not fully adducting the vocal fold, and that's going to rob you of resonance. It's going to rob you like the Old West. It's like a holdup at the old saloon, except they're stealing your air, they're stealing your tone. You got to adduct them vocal folds, partner. Sorry, it's the jet lag talking. It's not me. It's the jet lag talking. But I'm being silly, but that is true. If there's air in your voice, then the vocal fold is partially abducted. In other words, it's separating a little bit for you when we want it to be adducted, closed in the sort of common parlance, which I don't like because it isn't closed. It doesn't stay shut. It adducts. It moves towards the center mass of the body, and it keeps on moving back to that position over and over again in a wave-like pattern, actually. And that's how we create the pitches. So if you're getting that airiness or whistly, check out the How to Sing Head Voice videos or How to Sing High Notes videos on my channel. And they'll take you through the process of making sure that you're really using your actual head voice and not getting a little bit of that abduction or falsetto sound in there. That alone will start you on the process to getting a richer tone, but the richer tone is all about balance. It's about balance between muscle engagement at the larynx and subglottic air pressure. And that balance will not be rectified if you've got that air in your voice that's seeping through. Georgie, in my opinion, which is a better singer, Beyonce or Lana Del Rey? Goodness. I don't really know. I would say that, well, first of all, I haven't listened to a Lana Del Rey song in such a long time that I don't remember the song that I listened to that much, but I remember liking it more than I liked Beyonce's music. But that doesn't make her a better singer. That just means I like that song better than I like the songs that I listen to from Beyonce. I think of that sort of oeuvre of individuals, I really like a lot of Christina Aguilera's stuff. I think she does some really cool tunes. And I was blown away when I started working on some Demi Lovato tunes with a client. I thought that was really cool. But of all those vocalists, I would argue that Beyonce has like ridiculous chops, which is a way of saying like outstanding musicianship and technique. I mean, there's a song that I was working on with a client, and the name, I mean, I could look it up, but the name escapes me right now. But as the song enters the ending sections of the tune, it's like key change after key change after key change after key change, and it's just astounding. And I've listened to her do that song live, and every time it's astounding. Now, I'll be the first one to say that when there's a microphone involved, all bets are off. The voice can be processed in a myriad of ways in real time to correct for errors and things like that. I don't know whether Beyonce is utilizing any of that or not. And I don't know anyone who could definitively answer that question. But it's pretty awesome. And I just, like I said, whenever there's a microphone involved, things can be changed. But she's got some chops. Ender, I don't speak, but thanks teach everything. I learn everyday practice. I am tenor voice. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Angela, I'm putting too much tension on my neck and larynx while singing. Can you give me some advice to relax those parts? Start your head moving. Move your head and neck gently and arrhythmically to your exercises. So sing your exercises, and just keep it moving, and that will help you to dispel a little bit of that tension. You're welcome, Ender. In Karuka. Thanks, Jeff. I'm glad. I definitely want to be helpful, and I'm glad that it's helping. Thank you. You're welcome. The Radiant. Can you sing Book of Mormon notes? I would have to listen to those. I don't know. But I can sing most of the tenor vocalist range. So if it's a tenor vocalist range, I can probably sing those notes. Ender, please continue different working voice practice. Okay. I'm not sure, but I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I can assure you of that. Nina Croft. Hi, Jeff. First of all, thank you for your really precious tips on singing techniques and warm-ups. You're very welcome. I'm a female, but I sing tenor, and your tips help me a lot. Keep up the great work. Thank you. I will. Logan, I've watched other videos mentioning raising your soft palate when singing high notes. Do you have to raise it every time or just on difficult notes? I think about that a little differently than the way you phrase your question. So I feel that I have to phrase my answer in a way that is consistent with my teaching, which is that it's not, I mean, I guess the short answer is it's every time, but it's not something that's done consciously. It's something that we practice and is done in order to achieve consistent tone throughout the various ranges of your voice. So if you're practicing with a mind of having a consistent sound from thyroarytenoid voice across the zona de passaggio, over the secondo passaggio to cricothyroid dominant singing voice and back down, and maintaining constant, consistent tone, then you will be practicing that lift as you ascend, and as such it will become part of your technique. It will become part of the way that you sing those notes when you are maintaining consistent tone. So I suppose it is done every time, but I think about it a little differently than the way that that's phrased. The Radiant. Yes, I can sing, I can sing A4. I think I've done G5s before. I don't know if I've ever sung A5. I think I probably could if I really had to, but I haven't tried it lately. You're welcome, Andrew. Eduardo. Jeff, what kind of voice Pavarotti uses on the comic of Nessa Dorma? Is that piano in testa? I was on university, and this is my first live in a long time, and you're still amazing. So thank you very much. Yes, voce piano in testa is the accepted standard for opera singing internationally. So when you're listening to opera singers, they are making smooth transitions over their registration events, and that's voce piano in testa. Yes, that's what's happening. I have gone pretty far behind here, I think. But I do have to go here shortly. Let me see what we got here. Lee Nightingale, thanks for the warm-ups. You're very welcome. Altug, posted my warm-up idea to sequencer in notation. Hard to explain here. Thank you, Altug. I will check it out. Thank you for reminding me of Sequencer, a global voice. It's the Facebook group. If you want to continue the conversation and also interact with some of the people that make it here as well as others, share recordings, get tips and blah, 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 just request to enter the group and I'll okay you and you can get started. I do have to go. And I must apologize. I've kind of dawdled a little bit today. And so what I would like to ask you to do is, if you just post your questions in the comments of this video, I will answer them. Probably not today, but I will answer your questions. And that way I can make sure we get to everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you if you've chosen to subscribe. Thank you if you've gone to the website and used the links to Amazon. If you're shopping on Amazon, it's just a click for you, but a small portion of what you purchase will be donated back to the channel. Nothing else will be different. It's just that it does help support the channel. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you so much for all your questions and interacting with me here. It's so much fun, and I do so enjoy these live events. I'll be back next week. And until then, thank you one last time so much. Take really good care of your voices. Enjoy singing, and hopefully I'll see you here next week, or I'll see you in the comments, or I'll see you on Twitter. Bye.
We gotta hit the road.